All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Friday Q&A, a webinar series produced by the UF Thomson Earth Systems Institute, Scientist in Every Florida School program, and the Community Scholars Initiative. Each Friday at 3 p.m. for 30 minutes, a scientist will present on their area of expertise, followed by a question and answer session. Slide. Scientist in Every Florida School is a free program housed within the Thomson Earth Systems Institute at the University of Florida. The CEFS program connects and builds long-term partnerships between teachers and scientists in order to bring current scientific research and big data into classrooms in Florida and beyond. The Community Scholars Initiative is based at Valencia College in Orlando, Florida. Our goal is to connect, create, and elevate educational experiences in the classroom and our community. Supported by the Lake Nona community, we facilitate programs in both Orange and Osceola County schools and work with community leaders and businesses to build out-of-school learning programs. During the COVID-19 school closures, we are happy to partner with CEFS to continue engaging with our students, teachers, and parents in a digital platform. Today, we are joined by Alex Kepley. She's the current head keeper of Lubee Bat Conservancy. She has a degree in animal science from the University of Florida and zoo animal technology from the Santa Fe College Teaching Zoo. She has interned at Looby and the Audubon Species Survival Center in New Orleans, then returned to Lubee as a paid keeper. She has been with the facility for 4 years now. The Lubee Bat Conservancy is an international nonprofit organization dedicated to saving bats and their habitats through research, conservation, and education with a focus on children and community engagement. As Alex tells you about her work, please add your questions into the chat and one of our moderators will ask your questions. With that, I will turn it over to Alex.
Hi, everyone. Like she said, I'm the head keeper at Lubee Bat Conservancy. So we are currently still working with our bats. Obviously, we need to feed them every day. We do have the bats you see on the slide are all bats that live at Lubee Bat Conservancy. We have about 200 bats in our collection, and they live and breed at Lubee, and we do a lot of research and help others understand bats and educate the public on bats. So if you're interested in ever visiting Lubee, whenever things calm down, you can visit our website info@lubee.org to schedule a private tour. All right, and I guess we'll get started on some of the questions.
So Jenny asks, what are the type of bats that you have at Lubee? What are the most common species, or notably, what type of bats are there?
So we have almost 200 bats. We have almost all of them are fruit bats, which are the larger bats that you see on the slide. And then the very tiny bat that you see is a southeastern myotis. We actually have 3 native species that are found in North America, which are small, like the little one all the way to the right. She's actually only like that big in real life. We have 3 native species, that being that southeastern myotis that's in the picture. We also have an evening bat and big brown bats, which are a little bit bigger, but still small because they're our native species. The big flying foxes are found in the old world, Asia, Australia, and Africa. And those are going to be the really large fruit eating bats. You wouldn't see a bat that size in the US. They're all mostly found on the other side of the earth.
Justin asks, what's the biggest bat that you've ever seen?
So the biggest bat I've ever seen, the Malayan flying fox is the largest species in the world, and that's actually one of the species that we have the most of at Lubee. The bat on the bottom of the slide there that looks like a cute puppy, that's Malayan flying fox. And the largest individual we have at Lubee is Calvin. He has about a 5-foot wingspan, but the largest Malayans do get is around 6-foot wingspans.
Bruce asks, how do bats end up at Lubee?
So most of them are bred at Lubee. Most of them were born there and live out their lives at Lubee. There was a wild population caught in 1990 for research, education, and conservation. In the area of Malaysia, they're actually being hunted into extinction. So they're actually gone from the mainland of Malaysia already, and they only exist in the islands around the area.
Grace asks, do vampire bats suck people's blood?
Vampire bats do drink blood, but they're only found in South America, and they don't drink from humans typically. They only drink from cows and pigs and like livestock. But there's over 1,400 species of bats, and only 3 of them are vampire bats, and they're all found in South America.
Nikita wants to know, can bats be harmful to humans?
For the most part, no. They do get a reputation for being carriers of disease, but they're actually immune to most of the diseases that humans get. The only, in the US, they are capable of getting rabies just like any other mammal, but you're more likely to get rabies from a domestic dog than you are from a bat. Bats actually die within 24 hours of contracting rabies, and they actually do a lot of good. The native bats eat a lot of mosquitoes and insects, which mosquitoes carry a lot more diseases and do spread them much more rapidly than bats. They also are fruit-eating bats, disperse seeds, and also pollinate plants. So about 80% of the fruit you find in the grocery store is pollinated by bats, as well as, bees and butterflies pollinate a lot of flowers. Most fruit is pollinated by bats that eat fruit.
Adeline wants to know, what's the most interesting thing that surprises you about bats?
So if I'm being very nerdy about it, the most interesting thing to me is that they live upside down almost their entire lives, and their circulation is adapted to that. Us as humans, if we're upside down for too long, the blood will rush to your head. It's really not good for you. You'll get dizzy. You might pass out. The bats, that's not the case. They're adapted to live completely upside down lives. The way our blood works, we have valves that stop our blood from rushing all the way to our feet when we're standing upright, but it don't prevent it from rushing to our head if we're upside down. The bats, their valves work in both directions, so they actually have a very interesting circulation.
Lorna wants to know, can bats get sick?
They can. It depends on, I guess, your definition of sick. They do sneeze and have little coughs, but they're very, very hardy animals. They don't typically get sick. Bats who have been infected with Ebola and things like that don't ever contract the disease. So they never get sick with things like that. They can have allergies. Some of our bats do have allergies, and some of them have heart conditions, but we've seen cancers, but we've never, I've never seen a bat with a head cold, and they don't vomit.
Owen asks, do all bats eat fruit or other things too?
So 75% of bat species eat insects. The gross majority of bats around the world are going to be insect eaters, like our native bats here in the US, just like that little bat that's in the picture all the way to the left. And then almost the full other 25% eat fruit. Like I said, there's those 3 species of vampire bats that eat that drink blood, and then there is 1 or 2 species of false vampire bats that eat meat, but they mostly eat frogs and mice. And then that's pretty much it. There's those 5 species out of 1,400 that don't eat either insects or fruit and flowers, pollen, stuff like that.
Rafa wants to know, how many bat species are in Florida?
So in Florida, that's actually a very good question. Depending on where you live, you have more or less bat species. Here in the entire state, I believe there's 12. Here in Alachua County, I think we commonly see 8. But if you're further south, you have things like bonneted bats, and there are occasional fruit bats that might fly in from the Caribbean, but they're very, very, very small, and that's really only going to be the case in the very, very south of Florida. North of Florida, there's really only going to be most of those native, the 8 native species that 3 that we have here at Lubee. There's Mexican free-tail bats, red bats, Seminole bats, but they're all insect eaters.
Natalie asks, are the bats in Carlsbad National Park affected by COVID-19?
No, I would assume not, because we don't actually know whether or not the bats can get COVID-19. So there's no, reported cases. They do have, wild bats can carry coronavirus, but there's various different species of coronaviruses, and the type of coronavirus that bats have cannot invade human cells. So it's not the same as COVID-19. If COVID-19 did originate from bats, it would have had to pass through an intermediary species and mutate. At the moment, they think it's a pangolin, but it's, I don't think, confirmed. And it probably took over 50 years for it to mutate across species. Cats are also really common carriers of coronavirus, and I do think that domestic house cats are able to get COVID-19, but as of right now, there's been no cases in bats of COVID-19.
Justice asks, are any bats poisonous or venomous?
No, there are no venomous bats. Whether they're poisonous to eat, I don't think so. They are eaten in some places of the world, but not that I've ever heard of. There are other animals like, Komodo dragons, which aren't venomous in the typical sense, where they have a septic bite, which just means that they have so much bacteria in their mouth that when they bite you, the wound almost always gets infected. And bats don't really have that either, but they do have very sharp teeth. So puncture wounds from teeth like theirs are very likely to get infected just because it goes deep into the tissue. But it's the same as like a cat bite. If a cat bites you, it's also very likely to be infected.
Sure. Anna asks, why are bats important?
So the things that I was mentioning before, they do pollinate many plants. They also are the only bats that pollinate lots of plants. Agave is only pollinated by bats, so are hops. So is a lot of the fruit, like I said, that we find in the grocery store is only pollinated by bats. We also see the seed dispersal. About 80% of rainforest regrowth is attributed to bat species because unlike birds that live in the rainforest that tend to eat in place and spread the seeds near the edge of the forest, the bats will fly over the vast areas and end up dispersing the seeds across like deforested areas. So they actually do contribute to 80% of the forest regrowth in the world. And then also pest control is great. They save our agricultural industry lots and lots of money in pest control by eating, agricultural pests, mosquitoes, which are carriers of some of the most deadly diseases in the world.
Elise asks, can baby bats fly as soon as they're born?
No, they started flying very quickly, but not as soon as they're born. As soon as they're born, they spend their entire day clinging on to mom and nursing. They are mammals like humans. They do drink milk. So they nurse from their mom pretty much 24/7 when they're first born. And then within a couple of months, we start to see them try to fly. By the time they're 6 months old, they're flying pretty well.
Bruce asks, how long do bats live for?
That depends a lot on the species. So our longest lived bat at Lubee lives to be about 31 years old when she died. And she was a Rodriguez flying fox. There was also a Indian flying fox in a different facility that lived to be 33. We do have a lot of bats at Lubee that were caught in the wild about 30 years ago, actually 30 years ago exactly. And we don't know exactly how old they were when they were caught, just that they were young adults. So they can be anywhere between, 31, 35 years old. They could be older than, the oldest recorded, but we don't know an exact age for them.
Ella asks, what do you do if there's a bat in your home?
So I wouldn't touch it with your bare hands because in most places, since they are considered a rabies vector, if that bat has touched you or bit you, that it's definitely going to be euthanized. But your best bet is to try to open a window, open a door if it's inside your home and you kind of shoo it outside. Or if you find a bat on the ground, don't pick it up if it's outside and it doesn't look like it's doing well. If it's fine and it's just like fell from a tree or something, you can use either a towel or thick gloves to put it up somewhere and then it'll fly away on its own.
Britt is curious, is it common for little brown juvenile bats to swim in water?
I would not say it's common. I would say that it is possible. We've seen, there are videos of like fruit bats swimming in water, and we know that they can swim. I would not say that that is a situation that they would love to be caught in, because their primary method of transportation is flying, and it's not very easy to fly out of water or things like that. So for the most part, you're not really going to see them in the water.
Raquel is curious, aren't bats nocturnal? Are they all?
So most bats are nocturnal. Actually, all of our native species that live in bat houses, caves, things like that are nocturnal. So they come out at night and eat insects. Actually, pretty much all insect-eating bats are going to be nocturnal because the majority of insects are out at night. And then our fruit-eating bats are actually crepuscular because they don't hunt the way the other bats do. They're not really relying on the time that insects are out. They're mostly just going to be most active at dawn and dusk is what crepuscular means. It's just like house cats, deer. There's a lot of different animals where their highest active time is that in between dawn and dusk time. And those bats, like I said, they don't eat insects, they eat fruit. They're going to be, really active during that time. And then during the day, just like a house cat, they're going to be napping, but mostly kind of awake. If you watch our bats, if you ever come for a tour, or if you watch us on explore.org, where you can see them on live webcams, you can see them moving around, squawking, doing their thing during the day, but a lot of napping in between as well.
Riva asks, are bats scared of anything?
They're scared of a lot of things. They are prey animals for the most part. The insect-eating bats do eat insects, but a lot of animals eat bats. So they will be afraid of big predator species, birds of prey, things like that. Anything really large coming at them is going to alarm them.
Sam is wondering, how many mosquitoes on average does a bat consume each night?
So one of those native bats that were in the previous slide can eat up to 1,000 mosquitoes in 1 hour.
Wow. Pedro asks, do bats have good eyesight?
Yes, they do. That's a really common misconception, is that bats are blind. They get that reputation because they echolocate. And so our insect-eating nocturnal bats use echolocation to be able to see in the dark. They don't have, excellent night vision. They have that echolocation that helps them navigate while they're flying around caves and other dark environments. But they do see just fine, especially the fruit bats that can see in color, because they need to be able to determine if fruit is ripe or not. They actually see in color. They see just fine. They see like us.
Zachary's wondering, why do bats hang upside down?
They've just adapted to that. The best guess we have to why they've adapted to live upside down is because as the only flying mammal, birds actually have very different adaptations to be able to fly. They have, the mostly hollow structure of their bones and things like that. Bats are mammals, so they're like us. They don't have the same adaptations that birds have. So it's a little bit easier to take flight when you're dropping out of a tree or wherever you're roosting, and that drop gets the air underneath them. It makes it a lot easier to fly. So that's the best guess we have as to why they've adapted to live upside down.
Grace is curious, what got you interested in studying bats?
So I studied animals, a variety of animals. Bats are really interesting animals, but I mostly got involved with Lubee Bat Conservancy while I was in college, and started interning there, working there as well, and getting involved in the research and the science. And they're really beneficial to humans and incredibly unique animals. So I just kind of went from there and started learning more and more about them.
Angela asks, what are some of the best adaptations that bats have?
So definitely flying. I mean, they're the only mammal that flies. Every other type of like flying mammal is actually glides. So like sugar gliders, flying squirrels, Some flying lemurs, I think, are another one. They glide. So it's basically like, you know, slowed down falling. But bats are the only mammal that's able to gain lift and actually fly away at any great distance. And that, you know, that's probably the coolest adaptation that they have, aside from, you know, all their adaptations for living upside down, hanging and things like that. They also, you know, have a lot of, like, their feet are very interesting because of the way that they hold on when they're upside down. They don't fall out of a tree. Birds' feet are similar to this as well, where when they're holding on, there's a tendon that gets pressed in their toes that makes them grip their feet. So they can't fall. They have to think about it to let it go. That's why birds and bats are able to roost in trees and fall asleep and not fall down, because their feet won't let go unless they try to let go.
Lorna has 2 questions. 1, can bats break their wings? And 2, can bats fly when they're pregnant?
Yes and yes. They don't fly super well when they're pregnant. They are very heavy, so they tend to fly towards the ground. But as far as breaking their wings, yes, absolutely. Their wings are actually structured exactly the same as our hands, again, because they're mammals. So if you see a bat with their wings stretched out, you can actually see the little hook at the top is a thumb that they use to hold on to things. And then their finger bones are really long inside of their wings, and there's just skin stretched between those. So those finger bones are very fragile, but they heal very quickly. They can get fractures really easily if they hit their bone on something, but you know, they have really amazing healing properties. They heal super fast, and that fracture will mend itself. They can break the bones in their arm, which are also inside of their wing, and that is a much more serious injury that in the wild they might not recover from. We've had an injury like that at Lubee, and it required surgery to repair.
Tyler asks, how high can bats fly?
Very high. I don't know what in the wild how high they would comfortably fly. I know that, you know, they've been kept in exhibits that are very, very tall at Busch Gardens. They'd had bats in a 30-foot tall enclosure, and they would fly up to the top of the enclosure and roost there. So they can fly very high. I don't know if there's like an upwards limit, but typically I think they would just fly up to where they need to roost.
Bruce asks, can bats recognize people like dogs can recognize their owner?
Yes, definitely. The bats at Lubee do recognize us, the keepers, that they see every day, as opposed to strangers. They do get more comfortable with the people that they see more often. Some of us have bats that we train just like dogs. So the bats are very comfortable with their trainers. They spend a lot of time with them. There's a step in training called relationship building, where you basically spend a lot of time with that animal to get them comfortable with you. And the bats do gain comfort and familiarity with their trainers.
Nikita's wondering, what do bats do if they face predators?
Typically they would, if they can, they fly away. That's their best defense, because most of their predators might not be able to fly. Now, birds of prey can fly, and they are a predator of theirs as well. So they would just, you know, do their best to outmaneuver or to hide. A lot of bats, their best defense is camouflage. Our little native bats are known to try to pass themselves off as dead leaves in trees because they're tiny and they're brown, or, you know, hide against the trunks of trees.
Owen is wondering, how many babies do bats have?
So our fruit bats typically have one. There have been cases of twins. We've had actually 2 sets of twins at Lubee, but it's pretty rare. And in the wild, usually one of the 2 twins would not survive. Now, our little native bats that are found in the US are actually much more commonly giving birth to twins, triplets. There's even been quadruplets, which is a little bit more rare, but they typically have 2 or 3 at once.
Zachary asks, how many bones are in a bat's body?
I don't know about a total, but they have almost all of the same bones that humans have. Most of their skeleton is structured in the same way. They have, you know, the same like vertebra, and a couple of bat species have tails, so that's going to be a little bit more than we do as humans. They have 32 teeth, so their bones are very, very similar to ours.
Okay, and Noah asks, are there any species of bats that are endangered?
Yes, many. So I mentioned Rodriguez flying foxes earlier. That used to be the most endangered mammal in the world. They are now doing much better. They used to only have 75 individuals left in the wild. Now through, local conservation and education, they have increased their numbers to 15,000. In the US, there's some endangered bats. There's the bonneted bat in South Florida. That bat is critically endangered, so they're not doing super well. It really depends in the region. There are some bats that have gone extinct, but lots of different ones. So big brown bats, they're doing great. They're the most common bat in the US. But like I said, the Florida bonneted bat is critically endangered.
Well, it's hard to believe that we've actually had 30 minutes of Q&A, and there's so many more questions that are rolling in. We want to thank everyone for joining us today on the call, and especially Alex Kepley from the Lubee Bat Conservancy in Gainesville, Florida, for connecting with us today. Once again, our Friday Q&As with scientists take place at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time as part of the collaboration between scientists in every Florida school and the Community Scholars Initiative. You can learn more about our guests and our programs by visiting the websites you see on the screen here. You can also find the recording of today's programming at UF Thompson Earth Systems YouTube channel. We will also have resources posted regarding bats there, and the questions and answers that we haven't gotten to, we'll try to have Alex answer for you. Please be sure to register for next Friday's Q&A. We're going to actually be talking about birds of prey. So thank you again, and we hope to see you again next time. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.